Station 51, engine 27, engine 32, truck 105.
You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf.
Welcome to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire. And talk about Wildfire, boy, and teams. Some of the local teams around here are pretty amazing. And I've got James Estle with me. And James is the Wildland Fire Captain for the Evergreen Fire Department or District. I'm going to go ahead, correct me on that, James.
Yeah, that'll be Evergreen Fire Rescue. So yeah, it's we're a special district. So
all the above. Well, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So tell me about what's going on in Evergreen. What are the concerns there? What are some of the recent challenges you've had there?
Yeah, so I've been with Evergreen for going on 3 years now, and kind of came in as a fuels crew supervisor because they were kind of rebuilding their wildland division because there's definitely a need for mitigation on within various parcels within the district. So we do a lot of work with Denver Mountain Parks and JCOS, things like that. And working on evacuation routes is a big one. So I came in and to help rebuild the program. Like I said, in January of 2023. And a little bit of background on that is just run a fuels crew. So I have two lieutenants that work underneath of me, and then I have 10 seasonals that come on at the end of April and work through October doing fuel reduction within the district. So we pretty much base most of our...
And when you say fuels reduction, you're talking about vegetation removal?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have a residential chipping program that we do, and then we do, a lot of chainsaw work within the district based on high priority areas from our CWPP. So that's kind of, and we're just, hopefully our new CWPP will be out in the next 3 to 4 weeks, and then we'll kind of reevaluate and move forward with that. So, but yeah, so the high priority areas with, it's a lot of overgrown forest within Evergreen district. So we're trying to concentrate on, some roadside stuff for evacuations if there was a fire, and then doing, smaller, 10 to 15 acre projects at a time.
I see. Okay. And do you have enough staff to get the fuel reductions done that you want to get done?
No, I don't think there's ever enough staff. Like I said, between myself and my 2 lieutenants we're full time. My Wildland Division Chief, Jason Puffett, helps out, and then on the other side of our division, we have the Jess Moore, who is the Wildland Project Coordinator. So she's doing the grant stuff and kind of lining the projects out. And then she has 2 mitigation specialists that work for her, Keenan Prouty and Dory Dalton, who go and do the home ignition zone inspections with individual properties throughout the district. And then I have the 10 seasonals to come on for 6 months. So, there's always room for more employees to help get the work done. So is where I'm. It's always use 5. Like right now, 5 more would be ideal. So
okay, 5 people would. And what's the size of your district?
It's like 130 roughly square miles, 140 square miles.
That's a big area.
Yeah, it's pretty big. It's a little bit smaller than my last one, but it's a lot more populated. I spent almost 12, 13 years working as a career firefighter up in Fairplay for Northwest Fire, and our district there was 287 square miles. So
I see.
But a lot more populated down in Evergreen.
So I imagine as a wildland fire guy, it's hard for you to drive anywhere without looking around and imagining what the place is going to look like when the fire hits.
Yeah, absolutely. It's it's kind of cliche, but I don't know if you've seen the movie Only the Brave, and they're sitting on the hillside, they're training the rookies, and they're like, what do you see? And it's like, all I see is fuel, which is, it's true. And you look out, and that's what we see. It's like, what if fire gets into the area, like and as as being a wildland firefighter, and then working on the prevention side of it now, it's that fire behavior when it gets into certain fuel types, and looking at Evergreen, or I drive the 285 corridor every single day in the afternoon. Just what if, and kind of envisioning what that would look like, and just running through all these different things that were trained in my head, because I have an hour drive.
So yeah, so you're looking through and you're doing the what if,
Mhm.
and I would think of it now as the when if,
Yeah,
or or
becoming
just
that.
the when, right? There's no if about it. We know
Right.
fire's going to hit everywhere.
Yep.
Um,
It's
so
yep, exactly. So
yeah, so what are so basically you work from a worst case scenario backwards. You say, worst case scenario, this could happen, and so we're going to start our mitigation efforts here, and then work back to the
yeah,
more minor
absolutely.
scenarios.
Yeah, kind of. It's so, the big thing is within Evergreen, like we do have so much, or so many people that live there. So one of our higher priorities is the evacuation route. So making sure that if we do get a fire within our district, that the individual homeowners can get out safely, um, and not, having that, that paradise fire kind of mentality where it's just people are on the road, they're stuck, and everything's just burning around them. So we do spend a lot of time doing, like I said, roadside fuels reduction for with that intent, that if we do need to evacuate, we have a lot of one way in, one way out areas within our district, that if we do have to evacuate certain areas in the district, that hopefully it's going to be a little bit safer as they're trying to exit. So we focus on that, and we like I said, we partner with Denver Mountain Parks and JCOS, and they're doing good work on larger scales and trying to tie in projects around the district. So that's kind of the main focus currently, is kind of some of this roadside stuff. Just trying to make these main veins, so to say, out of the district a little bit more survivable.
Yeah. So what does that look like physically when you have these, one road in and out communities, and you want to make sure that they have a safe evacuation route, that they don't repeat the paradise
Mhm.
situation. What does that mean physically? 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet?
Usually, it depends on the project. I mean, some of the projects we're doing on some private land, we do like a free roadside mitigation where Keenan and Dory go out and they do the home inspection, and then it's up to them walking the homeowners and marking trees roadside, and that's about 30 feet. Some of the other bigger projects that we're doing, we're looking at 150 feet on both sides. So you're
Wow.
300 feet of, and it's not clear cut. We're looking at, depending on whose land it is, we work with them and see what their prescriptions are for fuel removal. Um, and most of them are pretty good. And we go to the home ignition zones, which is called the HIZs. But we usually try to go to that zone 3, which is, there's still quite a bit of vegetation in there, but it's not, it's not a clear cut. So there's still, viable trees, and we try to keep it nice visually, but we are
Right.
taking it out. So so we're giving some crown spacing, 10-foot crown spacing around a tree or a group of 3 or 4 trees, and kind of, getting all the ladder fuels up, and kind of getting all the regen out of there that's grown over the years, and, taking, removing quite a bit of biomass from these areas. So, and then
So
we'll chip and haul it, or we'll massacate it in place depending on the description.
I see. So you really need arborists out there.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, the fact that they can fight fire when there's a fire is almost less important to that project.
right, and that's kind of what we do. Like I said, with myself, with the lieutenants and the fuels crew, we're kind of like a pseudo suppression module. So the textbook definition of the suppression module is, it's a fuels reduction crew that fights wildland fire. So we do the cutting, we do the chipping, we respond to initial attack in district, mutual aid, and then we deploy naturally as needed. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. So, for so long we've been super reactive when it comes to a wildfire, and there's a few agencies, and I like to, include Evergreen Fire in that, was, starting to be that, that proactive side of things of what can we do now to prevent the wind. And there's a good handful of those around the state that are starting to pop up more, hopefully every day. So
Right. So for a community that hasn't done any fuels reduction, what does a program look like?
It's a lot of work. Because when I started Evergreen, it was, they had the crew before I started there, but it was like two or three, maybe four people at most, and they were just doing small projects and doing some residential chipping. But then, I came in because with my background, I've got a lot of fire background, a lot of teaching background, so I have, avenues for getting employees um, pretty easily where I teach. And so building that to a 10-person crew and sustaining that's kind of the hard part. But it's working through our, is it, are your projects going to be department funded? Or are you going to search grants? Or are you just going to do it for free? There's all these different avenues. And, where I live in Fairplay, there hasn't, I was at this department for, like I said, almost 12 years or so. And we didn't really do any fuels reduction here because it was just all 911. But they just hired, a mitigation specialist, so they're getting the program started. So hopefully, I can work with them and be like, hey, here's what I've done over the last 3 years. How's that going to help? Summit County Fire, same thing. They just, got a wildland division kind of stood up over the last 3 or 4 years, and they're putting good things in place. And hopefully next year they'll be able to, to start getting a fuels crew put in place. Whether that's 3, 5, 10 people, it's baby steps, but and it's definitely it's work. It's work. So trying to
Yeah, right.
on both sides catching up with the amount of fuel that needs to be removed, and trying to sustain all these new people within the departments. So
Yeah, right. Well, when you look at, your home ignition zones and the inspections that your folks do home to home, there's a concern generally, right, that, if I do all the mitigation work I can, but my neighbor doesn't, and we're close enough, then their home lights my home on fire, regardless of what I've done, right? Because of the, you can even have direct flame contact or the heat levels just catch it. So to what degree does that same concept exist between different communities? That if we do our mitigation and the neighboring community doesn't, they're still sending the fire to us.
Yeah, absolutely. You always have to think about that big picture of like what's downstream. And, it was good. We just worked, like I said, we just worked through our CWPP, excuse me. And, hopefully that'll be out in the next, like I said, 3 to 4 weeks. It's getting reviewed now. But we're working with, Denver Mountain Parks, Jefferson Open Space, the Arapahoe National Forest, Jefferson County Sheriff's Office, all these big partners. And, on our maps, Evergreen's a tiny little dot right here. We're looking out huge, right? So if the Arapahoe has a fire in their forest, and topography and weather align, what's that look like for Evergreen that's 20, 30 miles away? And
Right.
can we stop it? What projects do they have going? And how can we assist? How can we tie things together? So it's really, we talk about the 30,000-foot view. I think it's really on on one level, it's much larger than that. Even if if Summit County gets something, what's that look like, right? Because they're going to send all their evacuees down.
Right.
So it's not just the fire; it's all the people that are getting evacuated from the area coming down towards down I-70. So so you got to take all these things into play, and you can't predict anything, and it's never going to go the way you train on it. But you do the best you can, and hopefully with enough partners. I mean, we're talking about getting, animal rescue in there, because like people got horses and cattle, and all of it has to come, into play, and try to put all these pieces together for something that might happen,
Right.
you know,
Yep.
and, and everybody wants to do mitigation for their neighbor, like you said, and it's, we try to, educate as many people as possible, and some people do the work and some people won't, and we can't force them, but when it comes down to it, there's fire, there's wherever, there's fire, if there's fire around houses, we're going to tend to, firefighters assist the people that are, putting the work in themselves, so and trying to save their homes. But it all depends on fire behavior and all the things, right? I mean, it's, marshal fire, there's nothing you can do, right? Once it started one, it's just a domino effect. So at that point, it's maybe we're not even fighting fire, we're just getting people out at that point. So
Yeah. Well, you talked about the lessons you learned from Paradise,
yeah,
which they were not new lessons. They were just underlined heavily, by that experience. Tell me about when you were watching footage from the LA fires. Were there lessons you were picking up there?
yeah. So I don't have any social media at all, except
Okay,
for,
good for you.
so I got the LinkedIn, which is where you found me, but or contacted me. I don't really watch the news anymore, so I got to keep an eye on it. Mostly, the fires around the country in case I need to go. Um, but yeah, it's just one of those things, like, just like the Marshall Fire, where everything just aligned, and once it starts, it's hard to catch it, and unfortunately, it happens, and we do the best we can when we're out there on the line, but you know California just, reintroduced, prescribed burning a year or so ago, so they're trying to be that proactive side of it. And sometimes it doesn't matter, right? It's going to do what it's going to do when everything aligns, and you just try to slow it down and contain it, and rebuild, unfortunately.
Yeah, I guess when you say everything has to align, it sounds like, whether the ball hits on the right spot on the roulette wheel,
Yeah.
and within the course of an hour, whether it lines up or not is how many spins you take. And the
Yeah.
weather's taking a lot of spins these days, right? We're just seeing a lot more dynamic change. We're seeing
Hmm.
hotter, windier, drier. So the weather is creating more opportunities for everything to line up
Yeah,
for a perfect
absolutely.
storm.
Absolutely. And that's where, at least at Evergreen, we train not just my field crew, but the entire department to, it's when something starts, like, we need to keep it small because it can get big really quick. And so being really proactive on the response side of it too, that even as a smoke report, we've got various individuals coming, just to make sure that, that if it is an actual start somewhere in the district, that we're going to get on top of it pretty quick. And we don't want the Marshall fires. We don't want the LA fires. We don't want the Paradise fires. That's why we're there, right?
Yeah.
Is to prevent that.
Yeah, and I'm
Um,
not sure, even with a small response crew, if things are getting started and the winds are right, that they even could do anything.
yeah, absolutely. And you know, it's just constant training. And, in addition to, doing the fuel reduction work, it's, my crew works 7 to 5, Monday through Thursday. And it's, we're spending, as soon as 7 o'clock hits, everyone's there. We're doing briefings, we're doing weather, we're doing 6 minutes for safety, we're doing all these things, loading up and going out to the field, and doing our day job of the fuel reduction work, but always, you know, being ready, because it could start at any time. I mean, probably not today, but it's,
We had a lot of rain this week. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so constantly using every opportunity to grow, even, the newest firefighters' situational awareness, even a little bit. It's definitely, it's tougher now with a seasonal crew, because I got to squeeze 12 months of training in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
and kind of build them to be better than they were the day before on any little given thing. So at the same
I'm
time,
just
getting work out of them.
right, right. So you're building them up so they're ready to
Yeah,
take over when you retire, right? You said you talked
exactly.
about situational awareness. What does that mean to you?
Just really, just a head on a swivel in any aspect of your day. I think it's, situational awareness for, what is my weather today? What's my winds doing? What's my temperature doing? Um, you know, what do I have to do personally um, with, office work and getting in the field and helping the crew out there and, scheduling a podcast and, doing all these things, but at the same time, making sure the crew's got what they need to continue to do their job and, and leaning on my lieutenants to assist uh, with the day-to-day operations and getting the training and, they've got, meetings and things that they're doing and committees that they're on. So bringing all these things together and just really, not forgetting, trying not to forget um, even the smallest little thing um, that could impact something like I said downstream of on Thursday. You know, so just being like I said, the situational awareness is just what kind of radio chatter we got going on, or what's going on in the field. 'Cause like I said, we're doing with the field reduction, we're running chainsaws, so it's constantly you know high intensity work uh, with felling of trees. And so making sure everyone's safe. That's why I gave them all off today because it's, I didn't want them on the roads this morning, being icy the way they were yesterday afternoon. And we're not going to be in the field, uh, working in the snow. So,
In the snow, huh?
yeah.
I guess you get snow a lot of the year there.
Yeah, it's been a pretty mild winter in Evergreen, but the last couple of weeks we've got some decent snow.
So when we get a week like this where we get a lot of rain, do you think well, this is good, we're not like going to get a fire this week, or do you think, oh, they're just feeding the fuels?
Yeah, they're just feeding the fuels. It's we're firefighters, right? And everyone's always talks about, oh, we need the rain, we need the rain. We need the snow. And in my
We need
mind,
what? I didn't hear you. Sorry.
snow. We need snow in my mind
Snow.
because
Yeah.
snow is what's going to, saturate the fuels and raise the fuel moistures within those different fuel types. Rain's just making the grass taller, and then it's going to dry out. And then we got larger fuel that's receptive to fire, and then we got larger flame lengths when it does catch fire, and it's just a lot more deadly. It's going to run a lot faster. So rain is nice, but I think for prevention of wildfires, snow is the critical aspect of it.
That's interesting. But of course, it looks like we're seeing less and less snow
Yeah, so
each year. And now snow resort, ski resorts are not knowing what to do, and they have beautiful green mountains instead of snowy slopes.
yeah, it looks great, when it's all green. But I mean, Evergreen is in the green up right now. Where I live, it's been brown since October. Like we've gotten barely any snow this year at all. And what we do just blows away because we're on the continental divide. But it's been brown all winter and just ready. So um, it's it's the snow that we need to kind of help slow these things down or prevent them. But it's down in Salida burning last weekend or trying to burn last weekend. I think they said they were like 7% snowpack in that area. So it was not. I mean, it was good for burning, but not for
Right.
not for prevention of fire. So
Right. Well, I'm guessing you get hired in places that have a community wildfire protection plan, and you come in and you help implement it and you run crews. And so you're going to tend to be working in wildfire aware areas.
yeah,
That's why they would hire you. Now, there's a lot of communities that are new in the WUI, or just hadn't really experienced fire, and it's just not on their minds much. But a lot of them now are coming around to like, oh, we need a fire plan. What advice would you give to planners in those communities on how to, get better acceptance of the idea that a plan is needed, and then better cooperation of how to implement it?
I think it's, getting the community on board is the big one, and because they're going to be your biggest asset. Excuse me. Um, and doing your research, reaching out to other agencies that do have these things in place, and it's the fire service. I mean, like, we lean on each other pretty heavily on just about everything that we do or we see or we write or we type or how we protocols and SOGs and things like that. So so lean on other agencies that have these plans in place and see how they're doing things. And we all work you know, pretty closely around the state and the country sometimes, depending on who you are. But, get the community members on board and, get a good pre-plan in place of like, hey, here's what we're looking at. Here's what we want to do. Here's our high risk areas that we need to be concerned and focused on. And how can we accomplish that? Is that private contractors? Is that grant work? Is that, department funded? What's that look like? And then just, slowly, taking little small bites at it to hopefully, do something. It's we're behind the eight ball, you know, but like I said, there's enough people out there that are doing these things that we're trying to catch up. So, but it's a lot of work. So.
Yeah, and it sounds like you have both the physical side, the fuels have to be removed, so you have to do
Yeah.
something with them, and then you have all the cooperative bureaucratic side. Whose land is this? Am I allowed to take that tree? Is this in someone else's district that's impacting us? So how do you divide, or I guess not that you get a choice about it. How much of your time is forced to deal with the bureaucratic side versus actual fuel reduction?
Um, that's a hard number I think it's a hard one to put a number on. I think, now that, the way we have it set up for our wildland division at Evergreen Fire, it's, we have, like I said, Jason Puppet, who's our division chief, and then, myself and Jess work directly under him. So we're able to split that load a little bit. So he's, the chief level, he's, doing chief things and making those connections and working through those collaborations. And and Jess is out there doing the coordinating side for the grants and talking with the landowners and how much money is the landowner going to pay, or is it fully grant funded? And then kind of putting those things into place that are hopefully you know and then I'm involved at a say 20-30% of the time on some of that stuff, where I can really concentrate more on the actual projects and be in the field and like, here's the maps, here's the boundaries, here's the trees that are marked or whatever the prescription is, and then I can implement and have the crew just go out there and get after it. And I spend a lot of time with the residential chipping side of things, talking to individual homeowners on mitigation they've done and how to remove all the slash that they've collected on that side of it too. And then, like I said, I lean on my lieutenants pretty heavily for the projects that we're working on to make sure that material's getting removed. So,
how much authority if any, do you have on on homeowner participation?
Not much. We can be very suggestive and suggest this tree moves or this tree gets limbed, or they do this work, but we can't force them. And
Right.
most of the time, I think if the mitigation specialists come out and do the home assessment, people, they want it. That's why they're calling in the first place and getting the home assessment. They just need to be guided a little bit on, what that looks like. Oh, I don't want to cut all my trees down. Like, well, you're not. We're going to strategically take, certain ones, right? And, you know, take out the ladder fuels and, on the trees that are staying and then that. So, most of the time, like I said, the people are pretty receptive. They don't have to do the work, but, I think now um, with the insurance company things where people are getting dropped, people are a lot more receptive to doing the work to make sure they don't lose their homeowners insurance. And that's where, the other side of our division comes into play with Keenan and Dory doing the home inspections, and then, Jess coming out and doing the final inspection if they need a letter saying, yes, these people did all the work, and then to submit to their insurance company.
Right. I guess the insurance companies are in a tough spot too. They might say, yeah, you did all your work, but look at the community you're in. It doesn't really matter what you did, right?
Yeah.
We're going to jack your rate, or so.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really a matter of like the whole community has to do the work in order for it to benefit the insurance company's risk reduction.
Yeah, and it's definitely, it's a tough one. It's a hot topic right now, with
For
the
sure.
insurance and things like that. So, it's a good thing I'm usually in the woods. So
Right. Like the old Chinese curse.
Mhm.
What's that?
I don't remember what that one is.
Oh, the old Chinese curse. It says, "May you live in interesting times,"
Oh yes,
and
yeah.
you're certainly
So
living in interesting times here.
yeah,
But
absolutely. And it's fun. Don't get me wrong. I love my job. So,
sure.
it's definitely, especially with the seasonal crew. Yeah, as I was saying, we're
Yep.
doing good things at Evergreen. Like I said, we got a very supportive fire chief and Chief Ouija, and the board supports us. And, I think the community supports what we're doing, and, being that resource for them, is what, keeps us coming in every day to help, whether it's in district or, national deployments for fire, or, helping mutual aid and Elk Creek, or, the down in Front Range area, and, keeps the crew excited. And, if the crew's excited, you're going to get good work out of them. And, it's, it's a good building opportunity for, everybody gets into fire to fight fire. And, so being able to have both sides of that, of here's why we're doing it, to prevent fire, but now we're going to go fight fire, and you're going to learn that side of it. It's, it's really good. And then, I work in Salida a lot, teaching down there, uh, at Colorado Fire Camp. And, so we're teaching firefighters just across the country, in these same aspects of, whether it's chainsaws or pumps, or, basic wildland classes, or whatever. So, spreading that and trying to get, everyone trained how to be reactive, but, also, what that looked like on the proactive side. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're doing really great work there, and I'm sure the community appreciates you a lot. I appreciate what you're doing out there. You're upwind of where we are, so
absolutely.
right, the work you're doing is benefiting everything downrange, and not just your local community. I want to thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. And, like I said, I didn't really know how it was going to go, but I think it was good. So
It's just a chat. Right?
it's just a chat. So
Nothing but it. Yeah. Awesome. Well, we've been chatting with James Estle. He's the Wildland Fire Captain in Evergreen. Folks, you've been listening to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, we're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Check us out on the web, and we'll see you at the next one.
all right, thanks, Steve.